Well, let's summarize our week 3. How do we go about getting our idea on the screen, and what are the main elements that we have learned about? We've learned about the importance of a story having to be unique, about our characters having to be multifaceted in their development, in their stories, in their twists and turns. We've learned about how important authenticity is for a story, and we've learned about that we have to develop every story to the best it can be because it has to stand out in order to be greenlit. The process from securing rights to development, packaging, budgeting, production, distribution, and the release includes a few steps. We talked about the importance of choosing a commercially viable story. Now, commercially viable can mean if you are producing a movie for a targeted audience that is, for example, like you're producing a French-speaking movie in France, for example. This is a very from a U.S. point of view, it's not a commercial movie, but from a French producer's point of view, it could be very commercial because it could be very much colored through the local culture, and it just could be very successful in France. If it's targeted towards that audience, it could be commercial. It just has to be targeted to the audience in a way that it also reflects in the budget. So that means a French movie produced in France for a French audience should not be costing $50 million because it will never recoup that. So it needs to be reflected of the revenues that are possible from France through the distribution in the theaters in France, on television, and on DVD. So I'm giving you this example because it relates also to your talent packaging, to your budgeting, and through your marketplace. If you are producing a movie for a defined marketplace, you can operate within that marketplace and within that budget range and within that talent pool and within that distribution environment. Now, if you go wider and you are going outside of a certain marketplace and you decide I'm going to produce something for the global market, now you have to think about what is globally commercially viable, what is the easiest, what is the best, what is the strongest. And now you're talking about attaching actors that people know worldwide. Your lead actor will have to be someone people know about. Unless it's a television show, then your showrunner should be someone that the network stations support, or the streaming services, or wherever you're doing the show. So talent in film would be actors, and in television would be your showrunners. And again, we talked about the feasible budget being supported by 70 to 75% from international revenues. This is applicable for a globally commercially viable project. If you do a movie for $50 million and your sales estimates show $10 million, this movie is likely not going to make any money for anyone. So you have to keep that in mind. When you attach your talent, you have to think about how does this talent that I'm choosing reflect on the value of my film. So when I do a $50 million movie and I choose Joe Schmo to be in the lead, that's not going to be helpful to anyone, not even if it's a high caliber horror movie. First of all, horror should be cheap, and second of all, any movie that is $50 million better have a top A-level cast member in them. In fact, anything over $15 million should have a top A-level cast member in them. So the market today is very sensitive to these kind of things. If you have a budget that is higher or is hitting anywhere from 5 million and 6 million and up, you have to think about a lead actor that can push the value up so that your international sales estimates will be reflective and will cover a 70 to 75% bracket. You are always thinking about your marketplace. You're always thinking about your audience. You're always deciding what genre am I producing. Am I producing a drama, which will be more difficult to sell than if you're producing an action film or an action thriller. Those are genres that travel very well. Comedies a little harder to do because comedies are colored by culture. Not every comedy works everywhere. Sports movies in the US work great. Outside of the US, very hard to do. So there are certain genres you just need to be aware of. Your sales agent will know that. Your distribution partners will know that. They will tell you what genre works, and they will tell you exactly what the value of your project is, and you just have to be sensitive and listen to them. I think we made it very clear how important the story is. We have to find an innovative, inspiring, amazing story that is optimally developed and can break through the clutter. The needle in the haystack is not a joke. You really have to find something that is so unusual and so fresh and has not been seen before. Otherwise, you just don't want, you're not going to break through. I mean, look at these movies that are made today that are so unique, and it's their uniqueness that inspires us, and it's their uniqueness that lets them break through. So you have to have a high concept story structure, a multifaceted, multi-level story structure. You have to have surprising twists and turns. Don't allow the characters or the story to do something that you can predict. Try to figure out the exact opposite in your story that no one would really think about, that no one would predict. Give us characters that are inspiring and have satisfying arcs. Inspiring doesn't mean that they all have to be great and positive and wonderful. Your character should be multifaceted, should have good things, bad things, dark things, light things. They should have a multicolored personality, multifaceted personality, that it's not simple, that it's not one-dimensional. And when I say satisfying character arcs, I'm talking about a character arc that shows us that what a character wants is not necessarily what a character needs. So the story will give him what he needs in order for him to grow. And this growth has to be satisfying, has to be done in a way that we look at it and say, okay, we get it. He gets what he is supposed to have, and he learns something on his journey. We talked about the fresh idea of untold stories. We have to think about telling a story in a way that hasn't been done before. Even if the subject matter has been done before, the angle you're using to tell the story needs to be fresh. The way you are showing the story, the lighting, the moods, the locations, the camera angles, all of this has to be very innovative. It should not be stale. It shouldn't be something that we've seen before. You can play with your director and talk to him about what kind of innovative things you can do to support the story in a visual style. Again, we talked about the importance of developing the story with a target audience in mind. Think about who your story is for, think about your genre, and then structure the project accordingly. It is absolutely not a joke when I tell you that if I read a script, and I read tons of script because I get scripts sent to me all the time, I stop reading at page 25, latest 30, if I A, can predict the story and its outcome, B, find the characters unbelievable, boring, or just one-dimensional, or C, I don't believe the environment, the story, or it's just something that I've seen before. This all is set up in the first act. Your first act is your most important act because it is the act where you draw the audience into your movie. Not just the reader, but the audience. In this case, I'm the reader because I'm just right now reading your script. But what I'm reading is also going to be transpired on screen. So if it's not on paper, it's not going to be on screen. If I'm bored on paper, I'm going to be even more bored watching this thing. So the first 30 pages are extremely important, and you have to hook me in a way that I want to go on a ride with you for the next 90 pages. Now, as Sid Field will tell you, the structure is very important. It shows a 3-act structure in a way where the first act, the first 30 pages, are done to create your setup. You're creating your character, the environment, the issue, the problem. The journey starts here. In Act 2, you follow through. You will develop on that story, but you are giving it twists and turns that lead to a climax at the end of Act 2, where we think everything's over, there's no solution, nothing is going to work out, and then the writer surprises us in Act 3 with a resolution that is satisfying but also surprising. These are the things you have to think about. I really suggest you read Sid Field's screenplay books because they are hugely helpful. I actually studied him, and I found it very good for me, who is a producer, to understand how stories are written. And the reason why I say this is, even if you don't write, you are responsible for developing a story. And it is essential for you to understand how important it is that the story is what you need it to be. And you need to guide your writer in order to be able for him to understand what he needs to do in order to translate your vision. And if you don't know how to guide your writer because you don't know what story structures are all about, you're both blind leading the blind. When you work on a project, you have to make sure you have the rights. Otherwise, don't touch it. You know, there's the story about the friend that gives you a script and, oh no, you don't need to sign a deal with me. And then all of a sudden you get to a point where you can actually finance the project, and then the friend also all of a sudden becomes the enemy because now he wants all that money for his script that you cannot afford. I know this sounds like a nightmare I'm making up, but I'm telling you right now, it actually happened to me. And it happens to a lot of people, especially students in courses that I teach. So to keep friendships alive and to keep it on the straight and narrow, do yourself a favor. Always enter into a rights agreement with anyone who you work with on a development relationship. So if a writer gives you a script, you're going to do an option agreement, you're going to do a rights acquisition agreement that defines how long you have the right to put your project together, which is the option part of the agreement, and how much you're paying for the rights to the writer, which is the rights acquisition agreement. If you're hiring a writer to explore your ideas or an idea that you have developed or an idea that you have purchased somehow, this is a writer's agreement. That's a writer for hire agreement. Then the writer does not own any rights, but you still have to talk about how much you're going to pay the writer, when are you going to pay him, how many drafts of scripts he will give you, by when he has to deliver them. There's a lot of elements in there that are important, and you have to put all of this in your writer's agreement. The chain of title is applicable at a time where you're not acquiring an original script that has not been pitched anywhere else. So if you're acquiring something that has been pitched somewhere else or is based on other rights, underlying rights, for example, a script that's based on a book, you have to make sure that the book rights are also optioned by you or are controlled by the person that you are optioning the rights from. So any rights relating to the rights that you're optioning have to be optioned and have to be controlled by you. Development costs are costs that are associated with the work that's being done in relation to the chain of title, the option agreement, the rights acquisition agreement, and the writer's deal. But development costs also include things like packaging your actors, working with their director, doing location scouting, establishing budgets. All these costs that have to do with getting your project ready for financing and production. Those costs are usually funded by the producer, and it would behoove you to have an equity investor help you in funding those costs. We talked about the fact that if the budget is too high, the project will not be green. It's plain and simple. Your budget has to be responding to what's going on in the marketplace. So if you want to make a movie that's a $10 million movie, your international sales estimates should be somewhere between 7 and 7.5 million. You want to make sure that the story you're telling and the budget you are creating in relation to that script is a budget that the bond company can approve and is not too low. So if the bond company increases the budget because they feel you need more money in order for them to insure your budget, you have to think about how you can adjust your budget to meet the bond company requirement without the budget not being feasible any longer, because you do know what your sales estimates are. You work with, in that sense, you work with balancing industry standard fees, which we'll go into in the next slide. But the ratio between above the line, below the line, post-production, admin, insurance, contingency, legal, and finance fees, that ratio has some industry standards to it. That said, every budgeted line item is very much contingent on the budget that is being produced for a project. So the project is really what drives your budget. The talent is what drives your cost. And it is not to say that these ranges that we're talking about here will be applicable for your particular movie. They're just offering an industry standard range that is a bit of an orientation for you. But you have to do your own budget, and it has to be subject to the project that you are producing. So we looked at these ranges before. I just want to summarize them here. Again, your budget has to be supported by 70 to 75% in projected sales revenues in order for you to know that your project has value in the marketplace. It doesn't help you if it doesn't have value. You're not going to make money, and your investor is going to be unhappy. When you're working on the rights deals, the chain of title and your writers and everyone who is involved in the rights scenario, including your underlying rights, you ideally don't want to spend more than 4%, maybe maximum 5%, but I would always say try to stay in that range. The producers and overhead fees should always be less than 15% because the bond companies frown upon anything that is higher than that, and they will likely make you defer it or use it for budgeted line items. The legal and finance fees are obviously under your control because you decide what lawyer you want to use. You also decide what financier you want to use. Now, there are totally different lawyers and there are totally different financiers, and it's very much subject to the deals that you're making, what will find their way into your line item budget. Bond company is usually anywhere between 1.5% to 3% as the bond fee. That's kind of normal. You know, usually it's a little higher when it's a lower budgeted movie, and it's a little lower when it's a higher budgeted movie. That's kind of how it goes. Your marketing publicity is something that you pay your sales agent a portion of for them to go to the sales market. So it's for posters, trailers, maybe the booth at the Cannes Film Festival or the hotel room at the Berlinale, stuff like that. It will also pay for maybe some behind the scenes shootings or some stills, things that you can use and things that you need as part of your delivery elements when you're selling your movie to a distributor. Post-production is obviously very much dependent on are you using visual effects, are you using certain music that is expensive to license, and are you allowing your director to edit forever. It's really coming down to your post schedule and your visual effects schedule. So, but it should be anywhere between 10 and 30%. The above the line is entirely dependent on what kind of talent you're choosing and what kind of level of talent you need. So it's usually higher for movies that have A-level talent. So it's not unusual to see a movie that's $20 million having above the line of 10. It's not unusual to see. As long as the below the line is sufficient to get the movie made and the bond company is happy, that's perfectly fine. So the below the line can be anywhere from 30 to 50%. It really depends on your story and your locations and where you're shooting and if you're shooting with unions and what your story is. So it's very hard to gauge the below the line without knowing your script. The contingency is something that the bond company, when they bond your movie or your television show, will require, and they usually require anything from 5 to 10% of the budget. Packaging your project with talent can be a bit of a pain in the bum, as I say, because you have to start somewhere. Ideally, you start with the director. You have a conversation with the director about your story, about your script, about how you want to do it. And ideally, the vision that the director then shares with you that he had when you read the script somehow goes in line with yours or maybe elevates yours. That's fine. But what can happen is that the director tells you in the beginning, I totally see what you see. And then you're preparing the movie and it gets close to shooting and he decides to rewrite the script and his vision changes. This is not uncommon. You have to have a clause in your contract that says the script that you are hiring the director on is the script that you both agree on. With that element in your contract, you're safe to fire the director if they change their mind or change their vision. It's also important to talk to your director about the cast, because today the director can tell you, I love Halle Berry. Tomorrow he can tell you, I hate Halle Berry. And that will not help you with the agent that you just spoke with to attach Halle Berry. They're going to be very upset. So you need to make sure that your director is in line with you before you make offers to actors. And you also need to make sure that the actors actually approve your director, because it does happen that an actor will say to you, I love your script, I love your vision, but I'm really not into this director, in which case you have to let the director go. You will have a clause in the agreement with your director that will allow you to let him go if the cast does not approve him. You are going to obviously make sure with your sales agent that both your cast and your director will elevate the project and not devalue the project from the sales agent estimates that you have previously established. You can use your equity investor in securing him by telling him, this is the script I'm intending to choose, this is the cast I'm intending to secure, and only if I secure this cast will I be using your money. So the equity investor in a situation like that might support your pay or play offer to an A-level cast, because they know that if and when you attach this A-level cast, the movie is going to happen, and then they will invest the rest with, or likely invest the rest for the equity, and then you can go and do your pre-sales and do all your other things. It is something that you can structure with your equity investor early on based on just a vision that you have and a business plan that you put together. And how you put your business plan together is something you'll learn in this course. It will help you if you've never done this before, you're starting out with your new project, it's probably helpful to you to attach a seasoned executive producer who has a track record. Investors will likely require this, at least if it's a higher budgeted movie where the risk is higher. Sales agents like it. Working with someone who starts out can be a headache for a lot of people, and most people don't want to deal with that kind of headache because they have enough going on as it is. So you should look into presenting your business plan and your script to an executive producer who does similar movies than what you're planning on doing. So don't be shy, call them up, because every executive producer out there is always looking for something interesting to do, the next thing that they can do that is unique. And very often these unique stories come from people who are fresh, have new ideas, from new people in the industry. So don't be shy, use that to your advantage. Now, this is where the fun begins. We're going to create a project from an idea to a green-lightable business plan. Canvas will randomly select groups and group leaders. And within that group, you will be meeting at your convenience online, and you will create together one idea that you will flesh out into a full-blown business plan with all the elements you will be learning about throughout the entire modules, and you will apply them every week as you learn about them. Now for this week, you will come up with an idea, you put it on a one-page summary, and you'll think about 3 options for your lead cast, 3 options for your director. You think about who the audience is that you would want to reach with this, what your genre is, and you think about a budget range you want to be operating under. Please note that this is not an assignment that will be graded, so do not be nervous about it. This is simply done so you can understand every step that is needed for you to take an idea into a completed business plan to be financed or greenlit by a buyer distributor. This is for you to be able to know after you completed the course how you would do this on your own. The completed business plan is not due until week 10, so don't stress yourself out. You have plenty of time to do this. Just don't leave it hanging. Start meeting with your group, maybe set up once a week a meeting or twice a week so you can discuss all the various elements. You will learn about the elements that will go into the business plan every week, so don't think you have to know it all. This week, again, you only come up with an idea, you put the idea on paper, and you think about who you want in the lead, who you want to be directing, how much you want to spend, what your genre is, and what your audience is. That's all you need to do this week. And I will guide you every week as to what you would add to your business plan. Enjoy the process.